Good evening once again. Day 1197 of the Trump administration. 187 days to go until our presidential election. The daily White House coronavirus task force press conference seems to have temporarily gone away, but the president has found a way each day thus far to talk about the coronavirus, as he did today at two different events. First, hosting the New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy in the Oval Office, and at an event concerning senior citizens later in the East Room. With the death toll over 62,000 Americans, the president today suggested, when looked at another way, it's not so bad, and I quote, "Our death totals, our numbers per million people are really very, very strong." He said, quote, "We're the leader of the world. We're really the leader in this case, the leader of the world, and we've done better. If you look at our deaths, if you look at mortality rates, if you look at the things." About our current situation in this pandemic, he said, quote, "This is what it is. It's this period of time." The Trump administration's coronavirus efforts continue to get positive reviews from Trump himself. Quote, "I have to say it because the news is so fake and so corrupt. We did a spectacular job." The president said today he has solved the problem with the food supply chain. He further said, quote, "The testing and the masks and all of the things, we've solved every problem." Beyond his recent effort to deflect as much of the blame to China as often as possible, today he went as far as to indicate he has a high degree of confidence this started in the Wuhan virology lab. And today he continued to make it about his own politics. He said again, quote, "China doesn't want to see me elected." And he added this, quote, "I don't want to cast any dispersions. I just will tell you that China would like to see sleepy Joe Biden." In the real world we occupy tonight, the U.S. death toll continues to rise. As of airtime this evening, there is the number. It stands at just under 63,000. At the start of this month, there were over 4,700 deaths. One more sign of these very difficult times. Now more than 30 million Americans are out of a job. The numbers of people who are now turning to food banks to feed themselves and their families is staggering. Today, one of Trump's senior economic advisors told Americans to be ready for Depression-era levels of unemployment by June. We're talking about between 16 and 20%. Trump had hoped to make a booming economy the keystone of his reelection campaign. Today, he faced questions about the growing number of people without a paycheck.
What is your plan to get the country out of this ditch?
Well, I think we're going to have a great third quarter. I view what we have now as obviously a period of, here we are. It is what it is. I'll tell you, Jim, let me just tell you, we started off with empty cupboards. The last administration left us nothing.
Trump was also asked for his thoughts on how voters should think about his administration's response to the pandemic when they go to the polls in November.
And is it fair for the voters to take into consideration your handling of the pandemic when they assess whether to reelect you in the fall?
Sure, I think they do. I think they have to do a number of things. They do have to do that. And not me. I think our whole group has been spectacular.
President said today, quote, "We're being generous with people who lost their jobs." And as he seeks to turn the nation's attention to reopening, he is pushing his healthcare officials to quickly ramp up development of a vaccine. There's been no official public announcement of what's being called Operation Warp Speed. It's been reported that the goal is to have 300 million doses of vaccine available by January.
On this vaccine operation, Warp Speed, who's in charge of that? And are you overpromising when you say you're going to have 300 million doses of vaccine?
No, I'm not overpromising. Whatever the maximum is, whatever you can humanly do, we're going to have. You know who's in charge of it? Honestly, I am. I'll tell you, I'm really in charge of it.
Federal guidelines recommending social distancing will expire less than an hour from now. Tomorrow, more states will begin the process of loosening those stay-at-home restrictions while allowing some businesses to reopen, even amid the continuing rise in COVID cases and the lack of testing nationwide. Yet many hard-hit states are wrestling with how to return to some semblance of normal while safeguarding public health. In Michigan, protesters, some carrying firearms, gathered at the State House in Lansing as lawmakers weighed whether to extend the state of emergency. Tonight, the governor went ahead, extended it by a month, 28 days after lawmakers refused. In California, images of people at Orange County beaches over this past weekend in defiance of a stay-at-home order pushed that state's governor to announce a temporary hard close. In New York City, amid concerns about growing homelessness population, the spread of the virus, that's led state officials to suspend overnight subway service between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. every night for cleaning and disinfecting starting next week. And of course, the unfortunate truth is cleaning makes us all feel better, but a surface is clean until the first person who comes along and touches it. Meanwhile, the vice president was at a GM plant in his home state of Indiana today, notably wearing a mask, 2 days after coming under heavy fire for not wearing one at the Mayo Clinic, of all places, despite their stated policy calling for masks. Back in Washington, the president was asked if he plans to wear one during an upcoming trip to Arizona.
And I'm going to look at, see, where I am. Here's a place that we all feel very comfortable. Everybody's spread out. It's a very big room. But as far as where I'm going in Arizona, I'm going to have to look at the climate. I would have no problem wearing a mask. We have millions of masks.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.